stop fixing myself. And I need to really call it out to say, what are those invisible barriers? What are the systemic barriers that need to be fixed so that I can be myself? Because I'm highly competent, I'm highly confident, I have great achievements, and yet I'm told to mellow down and fit in so that other people are comfortable. But it's time I stopped making other people comfortable and I got comfortable with myself.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
Have you ever had a conversation with somebody and they remind you about your why, the reason why you do what you do? This conversation with Premila Jina has done just that for me. I knew it was going to be a gift for you, the listener, but for what it's done for me, my cup is overflowing, and I cannot wait for you to listen to this conversation because she does not hold back. She's probably one of the most authentic, open, and vulnerable people that I have interviewed on this podcast. And what is strange is the fact that we do not know each other personally. Her public relations person is the one who reached out to me and said, we feel that your podcast is ideal for Premila to come on board and to share a message about her work. And for sure, it really was. And it was a big, big yes for me. And I just cannot wait for you to tune in and just to hear the gems that she drops. And in particular, just not holding back and sharing lived experiences that sometimes we might be a little bit skeptical, a little bit guarded, a little hold back and not give the details. But she's gone there and she's called things as they are. So whether you're a woman of color who's listening, whether you're a white woman who wants to better understand how to be more inclusive, this episode is for you. Let me share a little bit about who Premila is. So Premila Jina is a global leader, speaker, and inclusive leadership consultant who has navigated the high-pressure worlds of top-tier finance and technology across 3 continents. Born in the stark landscapes of Rankuch in India, and raised in Nakuru, Kenya, she learned early on that resilience is a survival skill and that adaptation is a form of quiet power. Her career began in London, where she spent 18 years climbing the corporate ladder in global investment banking and consultancy, often as the only woman of color in the room. From the trading floors of the city to assignments in Sweden, Premila mastered the art of succeeding in spaces that weren't built for her, eventually realizing that true leadership isn't about fitting into a box, but breaking it entirely. I love that. Now based in Perth, Australia, Premila runs her own consultancy focused on humanizing the workplace and driving impact by design. She is the founder of Rise and Radiate program, a leadership empowerment initiative designed to help women and women of color move from invisible to invincible by owning their stories and leading with authenticity. Without further ado, here is Premila Jina. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Represented Podcast. And today I have such a treat for you all. My guest, we've just only met before I pressed record. So interesting because it was through her PR agent who reached out and said, "We feel like this podcast would be such a great fit." And indeed, it is. And I cannot wait to dive into this conversation. So, Premila, welcome.
Oh, welcome. It's a real honor and a treat to be here with you, Annie, today. I've gone through your website and I almost feel like this is like two souls meeting each other. So I'm
Mm.
absolutely looking forward to our conversation today.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. So, I spent much of the holiday going through your incredible book, The Leader Unwritten, all about becoming who you were meant to be. And I felt like uh, just seen in so many ways. And then we'll talk about your journey of living in different countries, and in particular, my home country of Kenya,
Oh,
living in
yes.
Nakuru. Oh my goodness, like there's so much synergy here, and lived experiences. And so, as I was reading your book, and the essence of it is really challenging us as women of color to show up as our whole selves. And I was sitting with that, showing up as our whole selves in the workplace, at home, in the world that we occupy, the spaces that we occupy. But I know it to be true that showing up as our true selves, our true colorful selves, unfiltered, can sometimes come at a cost. As somebody who worked in corporate Australia for almost 2 decades in the HR industry, I know what it's like, and I know that you cannot bring certain things because they might get in the way of you climbing that corporate ladder. And so sometimes it is important for us to show up with some kind of armor so
Yes.
that it allows us to survive and to navigate those spaces that were not built with us in mind. I wonder, what are your thoughts? Because somebody who's listening to this conversation, they're like, I would love to show up as me, especially as Black women coming with our natural hair that is not straight, coming with braids and all sorts of things. It may not be looked upon professionally and favorably. What are your thoughts about that?
I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head, and I like how you started this conversation. I just want to share by saying that, there's been so much talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion for a long time. And yet, just yesterday, I had my coaching conversation with one of my clients. It's a woman of color that I'll be coaching. And she has worked twice as hard. In fact, as women of color, we end up working 10 times harder just to be accepted and to fit in. And she then went for that promotion. Now, this is a woman from Sudan. She went for that promotion in an Australian stock listed company that's a real strong advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And her leader turned to her and said, "We don't have leaders like you in this organization. You don't look like a leader." And I looked at her like really shocked. I was like, wait, this is 2026. You work in a massive global organization and your leader is turning to you and saying that? And he's like, yep, I was said, we don't have leaders that look like you. And I think that kind of took me back to the very essence of why I do what I do, which was, yes, leaders don't look like us. But that's because leaders like us have not existed in these spaces. And the reason is there's this notion of, the leader has to be a tall white man or now a tall white blonde woman. So that's like the unconscious bias. That's the systemic barrier of that's what leadership looked like. And then we're being judged against that on an unconscious level. And we're not being given those opportunities. And I think, based on the book and based on my story, that's been my persistent barrier is when I was born in India, I came to Kenya and I was told, oh, you don't fit in. You need to do X, Y, and Z to fit in.
Mhm.
So I was an Indian, and then I had to like fit into the community in Kenya.
Yeah.
And then I went to London, and once again, it was the same thing. You don't fit in. And I was like, what do you mean fit in? And they're like, oh, you don't sound like us, you don't look like us, you don't behave like us. We are very cultured, very etiquette. So I learned to change myself to fit in, and I still didn't fit in. And
Mhm.
then I came to Australia and I faced that barrier once again. And it's very passive aggressive, very subtle. It's like, you don't fit in once again. And I've changed myself. But I think, when I hit the 40s, I started thinking, do you know what? How much will I fit in? How much will I keep changing myself to fit into a notion that I can't see, touch, or feel?
Yeah.
And I realized that I think I need to stop fitting in, stop fixing myself, and I need to really call it out to say, what are those invisible barriers? What are the systemic barriers that need to be fixed so that I can be myself? Because I'm highly competent, I'm highly confident, I have great achievements, and yet I'm told to mellow down and fit in so that other people are comfortable.
Mhm.
But, it's time I stopped making other people comfortable and I got comfortable with myself. I
Yes.
owned my superpowers and I really came in and I'd be like, no, let's fix the system. I don't need to fix myself anymore. I don't need to fit in. It's okay for me to be authentic. It's okay for me to be Indian, to be brown, to have an accent. I have something to contribute and accept me as I am and being authentic.
You shared so many things there that I just want to go back to. Firstly, this client of yours, because I'm a coach as well,
Yeah.
uh, Sudanese woman going for a leadership role in 2026, being told, there aren't any leaders who look like you. I mean, first and foremost, that is grounds for an investigation that leads to dismissal. That is discrimination right there, black and white discrimination. And so I cannot believe that somebody would speak in such a way, so blatantly, making it so obvious, because there are ways in which systems work in a very covert way where you're not too sure that it's a racial discrimination, but you can sense it as somebody who wears this skin, but you don't know. But for the person to say that, that is grounds for investigation leading to dismissal. And it is unacceptable. And I wouldn't want her just to take that as, oh, okay. I think that should be pushed further. And we shouldn't be having that kind of leadership, because that is discrimination of the highest level. That's
I
one.
know. Can I just
Secondly,
add to that,
mhm,
though? Can I just a little bit add to that? Is, you know, yes, that's one example, but, even I myself, I have worked where I have been bullied, and
mm,
you have clear grounds for bullying. And, I have brought that to the attention of HR. And then two things happen. One is HR kind of look at you and be like, oh, are you sure you want to ruffle the feathers? Are you sure you want to rock the boat? The process that HR have is so convoluted that I think it bruises the victim that has gone through that traumatic experience itself.
mm,
So I think that's one of the challenges. But the other challenges is like the retaliation you will face. So if
mhm,
you go and you complain, there is this whole fear of retaliation of, you're a woman of color, now you've gone and complained, so people will like either talk bad about you, they will avoid you, they'll gaslight you, they don't want to be near somebody
yeah.
who causes trouble. So all of a sudden that retaliation can come across as isolation.
Mm,
So I think while the things are happening and while some organizations have processes in place, the processes are so convoluted that a lot of the times women and even women of color are afraid of doing anything about it. And it's scary. And I
it
have gone
is.
through it. They told me, do you want to make a formal complaint? And I was like, after realizing how brutal the process was going to be, I was like, no, I
Mm,
don't want to make a formal complaint. I went for
mm,
therapy instead. I went for 6 sessions of therapy to fix myself because I was afraid of the retaliation and the experience I would go through if I did make a formal complaint.
Absolutely. I totally get that. And I have been in situations where, as well, I haven't wanted to push the envelope because I was like, it's going to come back in a very negative way for me in the workplace. But what then this does is that in many ways, we are perpetuating
Yes.
the system of exclusion. We are perpetuating white supremacy, and it continues to reign in the way it does because of our silence. Our
Yes.
silence perpetuates the system, even though we don't want it to be that way because of fear or the repercussions. This is your livelihood. You need this job to pay your bills, and make a living. And so it becomes really, really difficult. But I know those who choose to speak up and put themselves out there, they begin to, shift the narrative. And the second thing that you
Yeah,
said
yeah.
was around coming of age, getting into your 40s, and you're just like, hey, 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 how long am I going to be doing this for?
Oh,
And I think for
totally.
me, I totally resonate with that, being in my mid 40s. And I'm like, there are just certain things that I just don't take anymore. I will not be silent about that. I won't just go. I just won't be okay with certain things. If certain things are not okay with me, I will not be in that room. I will not be in that group. I will not be in that organization. I just feel like I have a life to live, and I want to live a good life. And I suppose when you're running your own business, you have those choices, you have that, which is a privilege to be able to do that. But I understand that it is not for everybody. But I guess it's for us who are then empowered to begin to make a difference and do something like this conversation that we're having here today, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And in fact, I was going to say that's one of the reasons why I do the work that I do as well. I am a CEO, a founder. I run my own a management consulting company, and I sit on a number of boards as well. And I met up with an incredible gentleman. He is a GM at a very big mining company, and is from Zimbabwe. And he mentors me, and he turned to me one day and he said, Premila, you've come into rooms that other women of color have never been even given permission to. You have a platform. So the question from me to you is, what are you going to do now that you have a platform and a voice? And I remember being in that room with him, and he said, don't just be another poster girl. Do
Yes.
something good. Use your voice for good. And I think that's what kind of really started this journey of writing my book. And, I've created this Rise and Radiate program. And it's a women of color leadership empowerment program that I run. And, we've got our second cohort running, and we have plans to go national and international. And I'm really humbled but to be able to do this. But it kind of really makes me realize that so many of us have been silenced. And I think we're reaching a point where we're like, enough is enough.
Yeah.
Like, I'm working 10 times harder, I'm burnt out. What more do I need to be doing at this stage to kind of break that glass ceiling and move forward? And sometimes it needs a couple of women like you and me to kind of go to the side, go to the very top, and then break the glass ceiling from the top so that we can make way for other women. So I think you and I kind of carry that responsibility of, let's break the glass ceiling from the top,
Mhm.
because the women at the bottom are exhausted and burning out. And it's sad, some of them are then stepping out of the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is really sad to see that. But there's a changing tide. Before we started recording, I told you I've lived here for, 2.5 decades. Things are changing. When I first got here, there wasn't that representation. Those voices were not there. Those stories were not there. And one of the things that you write in your book is how hard it is for women of color to tell their stories because one woman's public failure reflects the whole family, the whole community. And so let's unpack that a little bit more and shed light on it because there's the whole, and I love how you put it about the wolf of shame versus the
Yes.
wolf of wisdom.
Yeah. It is just, it is scary.
Mhm.
I think, as I was writing my book, I actually wrote that chapter last because I was writing my book in secret. I was like, oh, no, no, I'll be vulnerable. It was a little bit of a self therapy of like, I've gone through all of this. God, I've got so much drama in my life. And I was like, let me kind of look at the rearview mirror and really unpack what has happened. And
Yes.
as I kept writing the book, I was like, never going to share this. Okay, written this chapter, never going to share this. Written that chapter, never going to share this. And then I came to the end and I was like, okay, so I've told myself many times I'm never going to share this. And I was like, where does that come? And I think, when I kind of looked deep within myself, I was like, oh, I'm still really ashamed that all this had to happen to me. And I saw the wisdom of where there are systemic risks, systemic barriers. But I was like, why is it still me? And then I was really afraid of, how will people judge me when they see this? Like, how will my family, bless them, they'll see me go through this so they know it. But, how will my immediate family judge me? How will my community judge me? How will the people I work with judge me? And I think the shame got me silenced. And I think that's where I came with this notion of I'm just one of the million of women and women of color who's been silenced
Yeah.
through that shame. And if I can open up, and in that way, me opening up, me being vulnerable, I give permission to other women to open up, then I think this is where we kind of start creating a movement of change. And I have this picture that I keep at my desk. It's about my kids. And a lot of the times, when I know I'm playing small, I know I'm afraid.
Oh.
I look at that picture, and I've got two girls, and I'm sure God has blessed me with two girls to help me on this journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I just look at those two girls, and I was like, if I don't do something, then my girls will inherit the same challenges I have. And it's been painful, like it's been agonizing to go through this. And I would hate for my daughters to go through that.
Oh.
So a lot of the times when I do this, I would be like, look, I'm doing this so that my daughters can inherit a better workplace where they can thrive and they don't have to overcome all the challenges that I have had to overcome. So I do this for my daughters, and I do this for all the other women that, have been silenced. And I want them to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, and to be respected because they are already incredible. I don't think we need to be fixed. I think the system needs to be fixed. So yeah, I think if there's any takeaway, that would be my biggest takeaway from this book is we don't need to be fixed anymore. I think it's time we stepped into our power so that we can fix the system.
I love that so, so much because it really resembles for me what my inspiration is, my children as well. When I think of coming into this country that I absolutely love, studying, choosing to call this home, and the barriers that I've had to go through, knowing that I wouldn't want them to go through those barriers, that hopefully through the work that I've done within myself and outside of myself will create a better landing pad for them, that they're not starting at the same place I started. They're
Yes.
starting at a different level. And for their next generation, starting at a different level. And just for generations of color, migrants of color, that we're ensuring they're not starting from the bottom. I remember when I first got here as a international student, the first job I got was a cleaning job. I used to clean corporate offices in the city. And to me, it felt like that's where I needed to begin. There was no aspiration of thinking higher because when I got here, that's what the Kenyan community, that's what they were doing. The women were cleaning offices, and most of the young men, the students, they were working in factories. And so that was just our way of, I guess, making some extra money. And that's where you began. No questions asked. That's just how it is. But for the next people who came in, they were waiting tables. And then the next people who came in, it was working as receptionists and assistants. So I think we broke that mold in that people are not beginning, migrants of color are not beginning at the bottom, that they're aiming higher because the narrative is changing. And so that is something really, really positive. And I love the idea of having a photo of your kid. They're so beautiful, by the way, your daughter.
Kid.
Just melt my heart just looking at them and just, using that as your fuel. Because as you said, this work is hard. it is scary as well because
Oh,
you know the
very scary.
repercussions that can come with speaking up and not being silenced. It's not an easy, cushy job that you're going to every day. It requires you to, in some cases, ruffle feathers, in some cases, make people uncomfortable with the narrative that you're sharing because it would rather be not shared or not told, particularly in the culture that we live in. We live in a culture where this people would rather tiptoe around this kind of conversation. And so I want us to go back just a little bit because you've
Yeah.
had such an extensive lived experience in different countries, Premila, which is what I truly, truly love. So you were born in India. And then when
Yes.
you were about 4, you moved to Kenya, to Nakuru. And then for university, you moved over to London, where you lived for about 18 years. And then you moved to Australia, to Perth, where I lived for 20 years. So, talk to me about the different places you've lived which have impacted your story and how you see the world. Because I believe, even though you were so little in India, and I know you've gone back, there's a different way in which you see the world when you're
Yeah.
Indian and you live in India, and then you move to Kenya as an Indian, how you're seeing that and how the experience of living there, your whole childhood there, and then moving to London and then to Perth, you have a very unique lived experience with how you see the world. And I just want to hear about that.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I must say, before we get into the story, is whenever somebody tells where are you from, that's like my hardest question to answer. I was like, how much time do you have? Because
Hmm.
I'm a
Hmm.
global citizen. That's my short version, but let me tell you the long version. And I think that's where it really comes in is living in India, being an Indian. I feel like my resilience was almost born in India. So born as a child in India, it's a semi-desert, and the Indians have a caste system. So
Yes.
as farmers, you kind of come very low in the caste system. And if you're a farmer and you're farming in the desert, your prospects in life are quite low. And
Right.
that's why a lot of people from our community migrate to Africa and other countries for better pastures. But I
Yes.
think my childhood was incredible living in India. I was a free soul, running around, no rules, everything was safe, nobody ever told me no.
Yeah.
So I just felt like I was a free soul. And then we moved to Kenya when I was 4 years old. And there is this thing, I'll say with the Indian community, but it's with any migrant community, is when they move to a new country, for them to have a sense of belonging and identity, they have this notion of India that they left with. And I
Mhm.
think my parents and my community kind of left with this notion of India of like the Gandhiji's days.
Uh-huh.
And then they come to Kenya and they have this, like, they form this close knit community, very tight
Mhm.
community that they have a strong sense of belonging to. And then when somebody wild like me came in, they're like, oh, you don't, like, you're an absolute rebel, you don't fit in. So
Mhm.
they tell you how to behave to fit in. So I was like integrating into the African culture, but also into a close knit Indian culture that doesn't even exist in India.
Right.
But people keep it alive because they've gone to a foreign country and they want to identify themselves.
Yes.
So it was hard living in that culture. I think, I'm actually a darker shade of brown than normal. So you have in the Indian hierarchy, the fairer people are like, the heroines of the Bollywood movies. They're
Mhm.
nice people, clever people. And then darker people are like, you're like the villains of Bollywood. You're not very clever. You're kind of made to do the lesser, the dirtier, the harder jobs.
Yes.
And there's a lot of stereotype judgment that already goes just by the color of your skin,
Mhm.
by the caste that you come in. So we come from a lower caste, and even amongst the Indians, we are kind of said, oh, you're very orthodox, you wear very loud colors, you're not very cultured, very civilized. So I remember even as a child, I was bullied and teased at school for, being a kachi, and I was very good with sports, so they would actually bully me to say, oh, khichdi power, and they would do that until I stopped playing that sport.
Oh.
So it was hard, like, being like, and I would go home and I'd literally tell my parents to say, why am I dark? You know, why can't I be fair like everybody else? Why can't I just be accepted for who I am? So there was all those challenges. I feel like kind of started getting me silenced from being that wild, carefree child to kind of getting silenced. And then, you know, that continued even when I went to university in London. I remember the first time I went there and I just gone to a tube station and I said, oh, can I buy a ticket to Blackfriars? And they turned to me and they're like, what? It's called Blackfriars. And they're like, get your pronunciation right, darling. And you're like, oh, lovely as it is. But once again, you know, your accent. And I was like, but we've been taught to read English this way. And they're like, no, but it's pronounced that way. So I must tell you, I used to watch EastEnders to get a British accent. It's like the worst way of like trying to get a British accent, but everybody used to watch EastEnders. So I was like, this is it. EastEnders is what the English watch. So let's use EastEnders to get a British accent. And I changed my accent within a month of landing in Britain because the desire and the need to fit in. But yeah, but you know, they're so sarcastic. British have this thing of they're really sarcastic. And then when you push back, they're like, that's a joke. You should be able to take a joke. Are you not getting it? It's a joke. But I was like, it's under the belt. You're sending me a message and then you're covering up with your thing.
They gaslight you, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, you're being too sensitive. You know, get over it, develop a thick skin. And that just continues over time. And, you know, that's what I mean by like, it's passive aggressive. It's like, it's hit under the belt. And then when you kind of push back, it's like, oh, no, you're the problem, not me. Like, you're the one who's not getting the joke. And I was like, but that was not inappropriate. And I remember, like, I look great in bright colors. You know, it brings out my tone. And I'd wear those colors to work and they'll be like, oh my God, are you going for a wedding? Or your colors are too bright. I think I need to wear some shades in the office. But it's all these subtle remarks that kind of go towards almost like silencing you. You pale yourself. You know, my entire wardrobe in London was like black and white and then the grays in between. Because I would go for the bright colors and I'd get all this innuendos and sarcastic remarks. And I was like, okay, you're telling me it's not acceptable. I get those subtle hints. But then a part of me is paling myself, paling my voice, my tone, how I look, how I come across. And then it affects your confidence. You know, the other thing I really want to speak about is being corrected mid-sentence. And it's a real bugbear of mine. This is like, I finally know the word of like microaggression is I'm speaking and then somebody like says, oh, you know, I need to correct your pronunciation. I was like, you could have waited to the end of the meeting to correct my pronunciation. We're 10 people and you choose to correct my pronunciation. Or you choose to correct my grammar mid-sentence. I don't see you doing that to others. There are French people in this room. There are Spanish people. There are Canadians. There are Americans with the and the. You're not correcting them. So why do you think you're allowed to correct me mid-sentence and, you know, stop my train of thought? So now I kind of really come back with like, I'll come back to that later. Hold that thought, write it down, but I need to finish my sentence. So I think they're all this, and I call this the microaggression, passive aggressive ways that you kind of shut down. And then you come to Australia, and I remember I took a 75% cut in salary. I had to start from the bottom again. Not as much as you, Annie, I respect that. But, you know, I had to start from the bottom, and I thought, oh, that's okay. You know, I can start the bottom, I can climb my way up. But no, you know, we don't know you, we don't trust you, you haven't done your time here, you don't look like the leadership we have. And it's like, but what do you mean? And I remember in one of my meetings with my manager, I pushed really, really hard because I know I deserve better. And that was my self-advocacy. And she turned to me and she said, who are you to dress up so elegantly, to sound so confident, to speak so eloquently, and to demand this? Like, who are you? And I turned to her and I said, oh, this is personal. Like, how did we get to this personal level? I have clearly told you I was a senior program manager and I've taken a cut because, yes, Australia's a little bit behind. I'm happy to do my time. But I was like, those remarks are very personal. And why do we get personal? But I could see the frustration and I know I had pushed far. But the thing is, I have achieved those outcomes. Yes, I might have to take a step back, But why do I, as a woman and a woman of color, have to take a step back?
Yeah.
I saw in the same company at the same time, somebody had gone from Australia, done 1 year in UK. He came back and then he was said, oh, can you give us a keynote speech of your time in London for the 1 year you did in London? I'd done 18 years in London and you wanted me to start at the bottom. Yeah, this person had only gone for 1 year to London and you wanted him to come in and give a keynote speech. So I did kind of put that out to them to say, that doesn't seem sensible. And they're like, yep, either accept it or move on. So I chose to move on. I was just like, well, that's just not acceptable to me. My self-advocacy is I'm good enough and I'm going to move on. And I moved on. I got in fact, I had a choice between 4 jobs and I got a great leadership job where I led a massive transformation. I've won awards and it's been like instrumental towards me, jump-starting my career and my business today. But I think we as women need to do a lot more self-advocacy because
Yes,
I feel like there's so many people out there who will take the lazy route of putting you down. And we have
absolutely.
to like really advocate and believe for ourselves to kind of stand up.
Self-advocacy is so, so essential. And also the support systems that you have
Yes.
around you, your partner, your husband, your children, that support system is everything. Because if they're telling you, hey, play it cool or don't ruffle feathers or we need this paycheck, it makes it so hard because then you stay stuck in a cycle, in a system where you're disrespected, you don't enjoy it, but you're going there because you need it. You're desperate for it. But that self-advocacy and speaking up and looking for other opportunities elsewhere that end up being better, that gives people the permission to push back. So any woman of color who's listening to this conversation right now going like, hang on, self-advocacy is probably what I need here. I can push back. I can test the waters elsewhere and see what opportunities lie beyond where I am today and just keep pushing because that is what we need. And I'm thinking about everything that you've shared then, particularly accents. Oh my God, I feel like accents could be an entire podcast episode on its
Oh,
own.
totally.
Accents and really just talking about the superiority that comes with that. Because as you were speaking and you're talking about being corrected mid-sentence, what came to mind was the French accent. Nobody
Yes.
corrects a French person or Spanish or Irish or Scottish. It's like, oh, how nice. What a
Yeah. Or
beautiful,
a Russian one as well. And it's like
yeah,
nobody's correcting it.
Or American for that matter. It is so accepted. That's how they say it. But for some reason, it is that if you have an accent that's African, Indian, a person of color, it is less than. And it's like you have to be corrected and shown the right way to pronounce it. Accents, there isn't that leeway of, okay, you're multilingual. English is not your
Yeah.
first language, or it might be, but you speak other languages other than English.
I
And
know.
so that is,
And it comes with a sense of entitlement because I was curious and I've gone up to that person and said, why did you feel the need to correct me mid-sentence? And they turned to me and they said, oh, Premila, I was doing you a favor. And I was like, what do you mean? So there's this whole sense of entitlement of like, no, 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 I am correcting you mid-sentence in the middle of a meeting because I'm doing you a favor and I want the other people to understand you. And I was like, no, you don't need to do me a favor because they do get me. I think the problem is more with you and you need to look internally within yourself if you've got some unconscious bias problems as well. Because I'm okay with my accent. It's not perfect, but I speak 5 languages. I think in 5 languages. So I am doing a lot of processing. So yes, 1 or 2 words will come across different, but we'll get over it. It's not the end of the world. So, and I've challenged her the same is you don't correct a French person, you don't correct a Spanish or an English. Even in England, I lived in England. God, the Newcastle accent is totally hard to get. The Scottish one is even harder to get. So I was like, I'm accepting of listening to understand. I
yeah.
think so can others. We don't need to be corrected mid-sentence. But then it comes with a real sense of entitlement and they feel they're helping us
And
while they're harming
superiority.
us.
And
Yes.
superiority as well that plays a role, in terms of this is less than, this is more superior. And so with carrying this many intersectionalities, if you like,
Yeah.
It's got me wondering how you've been able to navigate the weight of it all and still pursue leadership in such a visible way. Because there's so many barriers. I mean, if we were to list the barriers when it comes to women of color and what they face in the workplace or just in the wider community, particularly in spaces where they're not represented. There are just so many barriers, right? And so, how do you navigate that and still pursue leadership in a visible way? What is the thing that just makes you feel like I'll speak up, I'll push the envelope, I'll still pursue leadership, I'll still be visible with my accent, with whatever. I'm not going to let that stop me.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I think maybe I want to start answer it slightly differently, which is what I observed when I entered the workforce was I was pretty much like the only woman in the room. And then I would see another woman one or two steps higher. So I'd go up to her and I'd say, do you mind coaching me and mentoring me? And she turned around and she was nasty. Like I've had more women bully and harass me than I've had men. She is more horrible, I'll use a nice word, horrible to me than even the men have been. And I would turn to her and I'd be like, why are you this way? And maybe it was women of a certain generation. They're like, I have worked so hard to get here, into this position. I'm not going to let somebody else just come in just because they're a woman. You need to prove yourself, and you need to prove yourself even harder. So they literally would pull the ladder behind them, and they'll be more horrible to the women even coming in, and they'll make it harder for them as well. So I then realized that it was actually the man that mentored, coached, and sponsored me to kind of progress forward. The other notion that I then encountered as I climbed my leadership journey was there's only one position. So, traditionally there was only one position for a woman. Now that we've kind of got a good women quota, there's like only one position for a woman of color. So one for Indian, one for African. So the system is actually making us fight against each other once again. Where because there's one position for Indian women, it's like I'm fighting against my sisters. I'm not helping them because we're going to fight against each other to get that one position. Everybody else is celebrating and moving along. So we are actually, in the olden days, women were meant to fight against each other. Now as women of color, we are fighting against each other, and other people are succeeding. So I've changed the status quo where I was like, I'm going to stop that intergenerational fighting. It's a systemic barrier. Let's recognize it's a systemic barrier. Let's do something about it. I've managed to get in, and instead of pulling the ladder behind me, I will cast a net. If I can get more women to come up, then they will continue to cast a wider net and they'll bring more women up. This is how movements have started. This is how movement for freedom from colonization has started. This is how Martin Luther King has started. Let's learn from those great leaders of we need to work together. Alone, you're easier to break. Together, we are a force to be reckoned with. So I think that was my turning point is I don't want to be that woman that pulls the ladder behind me. I want to cast a net. And as I'm helping, with my book, through my programs, I'm seeing these women step into their power. I have this line of leaders create leaders, not followers. You, as I empower you to become a leader, I teach you the ropes, I teach you the games of how to navigate this. I want you to show leadership. I want you to bring up more women of color, more, to come into those positions. And I think I'm seeing that change. I'm experiencing that change, and I know that I'm on the right path. So I think that's for me is leaders create leaders, not followers. I don't want a follower. Even when you read my book, I want you to be a leader. When you come into my program, I want to create a leader, not a follower.
For sure. And one of the things you mentioned as well in your book, Premila, is the fact that you're a lifelong learner and that books and stories have changed your life. What's one book and one story that has done that for you?
I think for me, it was Brené Brown. So I do read a lot of books. I think I've read over, 360 books on average as a minimum. So I love reading. I'm constantly reading. I think I'm one of those that reads like 3 books at a go. So I love reading, and I really believe in educating. I think, even after finishing university, I've spent almost over 300,000 on my own education as well, because I feel that education is important. And I just do a little bit of a sidestep here. When we're talking about that self advocacy, what I've noticed women of color and women do is we're like, oh, let's get that next degree, let's do that next technical course, let's get really good technically so that we can earn that promotion. And I realized I was doing the same until I stopped. And then I watched what others were doing. How were they succeeding? And I realized they were not succeeding by doing another technical course. They were succeeding by doing people leadership, strategy, emotional intelligence, communication skills. So the last 5 years, I have spent a lot of my time and effort on my communication skills, my public speaking skills, social media, marketing skills. I have really worked on things that are non-conventional, but this has really led to my success. So I really work on and I spend a lot of money, like, in the thousands, improving my communication skills, my emotional intelligence, public speaking, so that I know how to speak. When I'm given a platform, I know how to use that platform for good. So that's what I really invest in. And that's one of the things whenever I speak to ladies about my women leadership program, they're like, oh, no, I'll do another MBA. I'll do another cybersecurity course. And I was like, but by doing this leadership course, I will take you from here to here. And they're like, no, I'm so used to doing technical things because I've been told that you need to do these technical degrees to succeed. But it keeps us busy, but we're not succeeding. So that's the trick. So coming back to the book, my book is Brené Brown, and I think that's my favorite book. And, she really speaks about shame. She speaks about vulnerability, and I have an entire series over here. But I think for me, it was Brené Brown. She braved to go on that stage and to speak about shame, to speak about vulnerability. She put herself out there, and I have the utmost respect for her. And I hope that, I am daring bravely. And I love her quote of being in the arena, where, I am in the arena with all the mess on my face, but I'm happy with that. And until you're not in the arena with me, it's not your place to judge me.
You don't get a say. You don't get
you don't get a say.
Things.
You can be a spectator.
I'm the one in there.
Yeah. So I think for me, that's what I am, is I choose to be in the arena, to dare, to do all this. It is scary. Like, even having this podcast, I know a lot of other women will be hearing it. I have been quite open and quite vulnerable. And I say this so that I can break that generational trauma of being silenced, and so that together we can move to be seen, heard, valued, and respected.
100%. What you've shared about technical expertise and how that has been used as this is what you need to level the playing field, or to even help you go higher and go further. I love what you said. It keeps us busy. It doesn't necessarily help us in the areas that we need to excel in. It just keeps us busy. In fact, it gets in the way of us rising. And I cannot tell you how much that is such a truth in our community, where we will go into debt. And I was having a talk the other day. I was giving a master class, and I was talking to women of color, and I was saying we will go into debt pursuing another education degree, whatever it is, just to have that extra qualification, just to kind of feel that we are worthy, that we are well educated, we're doctor this and the other. Meanwhile, whilst we're in the trenches doing those things, life is moving on. Things are happening. There are other skills that we're not developing that could help us propel, that we are not really focusing and spending time on. And so I love what you've said and how you've articulated that. And I think we really need to come to a point where we are addressing that, and we're saying it's not more qualifications that will get you through the door. In fact, that was such an aha moment when I came to Australia as a student, because getting into the workforce, it wasn't the degrees. It wasn't how much you had studied. It was your work experience. Like, do you have experience in this area? Do you have experience? Like, I just come straight from uni. I don't have any work experience, but that's what they valued. What had you lived through or what had you experienced that you can come and add on to the workplace? And in African countries, in what is deemed developing countries, we're still trying so hard and going into debt to further educate ourselves when other areas are what is needed. And I think we just need to talk about that more, Premila.
Oh, totally. And I feel like we need to talk about that because I I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. We are getting into debt. So not only are we busy, but we're getting into debt. And you do that degree, like I have this lady, she's got incredible qualifications in cybersecurity, like top notch, she is saving this organization day in, day out. But in spite of her qualifications, somebody less competent than her is becoming her manager.
There you
And
go.
then they say, oh, it's just that, she speaks really well. She's really articulate. She's really good with people. And then you're like, okay, but you didn't tell me this. In fact, I'm the perfect example. When I was asking for a promotion, they even told me, oh, you need to do X, Y, and Z for you to be here. And I was like, but that person's here. He doesn't have X, Y, and Z. So why am I being told to do invest in another technical degree while he doesn't have it? And it's only when I hired an executive coach that they told me, oh, no, no, this is the game they don't tell you is your communication skills, your networking, your public speaking, going out and getting those awards, speaking on podcasts, having your LinkedIn profile, owning your worth. That's what they don't tell you. In fact, in one of my jobs, they actually said, oh, Premila, you've got an incredible LinkedIn profile. You really you really speak about yourself. And I was like, so what's wrong with that? They're like, yeah, why don't you wait for permission from us? And I was like, I've waited, it didn't come, so I'll just continue to self-advocate and speak about things that I'm passionate about on my LinkedIn profile. I'm not going to wait for that permission, it's not coming. And it was the same. When I went for my first award, I'd deliver this incredible transformation, increase productivity by 500%, helped to get massive strategic clients for the organization, led this massive transformation. I had 7 nominations and I asked the CEO to submit. And he's like, Premila, you should be waiting your turn. And I was like, yeah, but nobody's coming to me. And I even said, oh, can the marketing team write a really good nomination for me so that I can win this award? I've got 7 submissions. And they're like, no, our marketing team is really busy. So you're not a priority for us. So you've delivered incredible results for us. You've made us look good. You've made us successful. You've brought in the money, but you're just not a priority enough for me yet. So I then went and nominated myself for the award. And it was uncomfortable for them. My self-advocacy was uncomfortable for them. They're like, oh, so you just done this? I was like, yeah. And I'm going for the award. Do you want to come? Oh, no, 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 fine. I was like, it's okay. I'll go alone for the award. I'll take my annual leave and go for the award alone. But I make people uncomfortable with my self-advocacy.
Yes.
And, I've had feedback to say, oh, you're not very humble. And I was like, that's fine. I can accept that because I'm advocating for myself. I'm putting my accomplishments, my achievements, the impact I'm driving on LinkedIn for myself. I'm building my brand and credibility. I'm not waiting. It makes you uncomfortable. That's a you problem. That's not a me problem.
Yeah.
I am burnt out and I'm going to advocate for myself now because nobody else is coming to rescue me. I call this the Cinderella story effect. That's my analogy where I was like, I'm not going to be Cinderella. I'm not waiting for Prince Charming. I'm not waiting for the fairy godmother. I'm going to advocate for myself.
Yeah. And I think in our Australian culture, I don't know if you've heard the term tall poppy syndrome, where
Yeah.
you can't talk too much about yourself or be what is called self-promotion. That's what
Yes.
this whole wait for people to recognize you, be humble, wait for us to, say these things about you. You can't say such things about you. You should know, and especially as a person of color, you ought to know your place. But we
Yeah.
need to hear your story. We need to hear about those successes so that we can dream bigger. A lot of
Yeah.
times you cannot be what you cannot see. And so if you're
Yes.
not seeing those stories, if you're not hearing about them, you do not dream as big as you would like to because there are just no examples out there for you to aspire to. So so important to keep doing what you're doing and just your strength. There's just such an inner strength within you. I don't know if you have such a support system that just keeps you going because you've got to have something that keeps the fuel in the tank. And I know you've got, you know, your children that are just fuel in themselves and looking at that photograph every day to remind you. But I just feel energized just listening to you. I just feel so energized, and there's just a strength that's in you that is undeniable. And so, one of the things I wanted to talk about was
Yeah.
clarity. You mentioned clarity, and it's something I'm currently studying. It's something I'm leaning into, particularly at this time of the year. It's still the beginning of the year, and I know that without clarity, you can't make big moves. You're always second guessing yourself. You're looking around to see what others are doing. Right now, I'm muted on social media just because I just don't want to be influenced. I don't want to look and see what that person is doing and feel like I should be doing that or what am I doing? You know, I just want to just be in that space of clarity. So my question is, what clarity have you gained that has shaped your leadership as a woman of color?
It's wonderful that you say, talk about clarity. I still feel that I'm a work in progress.
Mhm.
So, and I think every year in December, January, I do kind of, I like what you're saying about LinkedIn. I do mute myself from LinkedIn. And in fact, this year I've kind of like got all my notifications switched off as well because I
Mhm.
did realize that last year I was all over the place. I was like seeing somebody else do this, I would do that. The other person did this, I would do that. And I did each and everything that I saw somebody else doing it on LinkedIn. And I got burnt out and I didn't get much results. So this year it's all about consolidation. You know, I've got 4 programs that I'm going to be running,
Yeah.
and I've kind of come up with like non-negotiables. There's this new word called boundaries, which I only discovered in my 40s. And now I just work on that. You know, we ran
Mm.
this entire activity. I ran it with my first cohort of Rise and Radiate, where we said, where is there self erosion? Where are we eroding our energy, our power? And we identified that as a group. And then we came up with what are our 3 non-negotiables? What are the boundaries we set for ourselves? And we do this every year because I feel we're always a work in progress. And I've come up with those 3 non-negotiables. And I was very clear on this is the purpose for this year. These are my values, and I will self validate myself based on my values.
Yeah.
And I'll stick to my path. These are the 3 non-negotiables, and I do not compromise on those. And I've realized that as I've started doing that, I have more energy, but I feel more grounded. I feel more centered.
Yes.
But it's a grounding process, and
Mhm.
I do this continuously. Even last year, I'd done that where I said I won't attend a conference unless I'm speaking at that conference or it's a conference I'm organizing. And I
Yeah.
really stuck to that rule, and I was like, oh, that worked. So I think that would be the best advice I'd give is come up with one rule, which is a non-negotiable. It's your boundary, and experiment on that, and have a time frame for it, and then revisit to say, did that serve you? And then I think that's how I've done mine. And then now I've come up with 2 rules. Now I've come up with 3 rules.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of developing those rules. And I know I call them rules and I know I call them disciplines. But I think what I'm realizing now is part of the self advocacy is I'm setting standards for myself. And it's standards for self respect.
Oh,
Is how much am I respecting myself and what standards do I set for myself?
yeah.
And if people don't respect those standards, then they don't need to be a part of my bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is just because I'm so tired of fitting into everybody else's bubble
Mm-hmm.
that I need to start defining what I am and what my bubble is. I
Fitting
think that,
into
yeah,
fitting
and
into
that
other
gives,
people's requirements rather
yeah,
than what works for you.
Yeah, and I know we haven't touched upon this, but I think for so many years, women and women of color, we become emotional shock absorbers. Like we're just absorbing everybody's problem, helping everybody feel uncomfortable, making cups of teas and lunches and dinners for everybody. I just feel like there comes a point where you just have to say enough is enough. And I deserve some self-respect. I have some standards, and it's time I put my standards out there and started living up to my standards and saying no to people who don't, respect those standards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you've mentioned Rise and Radiate a couple of times, but I just
Yeah.
want to ask a question about it specifically. I know it's a program you've created for women of color. And as I was reading the book, it kind of builds up as the next step. So could
Yeah.
you share a little bit about the program, who it would really, really benefit, and kind of, the structure of it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think as I was writing the book, which was quite a mountain to climb, I wrote the book and I was like, I just want this book to be in the hands of this millions of women who have experienced the same thing. It's not the same situations, but it's similar, but you've been silenced. And I really wanted the book to be a safe space that you can read in your room and work through. It's got workbooks, you can work through that. But there might be a point where you're like, okay, I've read this book and now I'm ready to take that next step. And I think that's where we come into this Rise and Radiate program. I've deliberately made it a 12-month program because we're kind of working on all the end conditioning that's been there for years. One workshop or one coaching session isn't going to solve it. I feel like you need to go on a journey. So we made it a 12-month journey where I always have a small, close, intimate group of women. And these are women that are trying to break the glass ceiling. They want to be seen as a leader. They want to have a seat at the table and be making decisions. And they're being stopped. They're kind of hitting that barrier and they're almost like ready to opt out. They've done everything they can and it's just not working for them. They've done all the technical degrees. They've done everything and they're just not breaking that glass ceiling. I think those are the women I come and help. And we come together and the first thing we do is we validate each other because we've been invalidated for so long. The first session is we validate each other's stories, and that forms that tribe and that community that continues to support each other. We work through the workshops. I've created something called the voice framework that helps you to go from being silenced to be seen, heard, valued and respected. And we work through the voice framework in our workshops, which is and for me, the workshops is creating that safe, psycho-safe environment for you.
Yeah.
And we do that. But then each woman's journey is different. So we do executive coaching sessions where we work through that. And then I told you about my color. That's such a big thing for me. So we have a photo shoot. And part of it is we help the women to know what their color palette is, what helps you to radiate, to bring your best self, bring your confidence out. And we have this incredible photo shoot where we have cocktails and champagne and you're having your pictures taken. And when those women see their pictures, I think they're blown away.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many women start seeing themselves as a leader when they see those pictures. And they use those pictures for their LinkedIn profile, for their internal work profile. People are judging you in 7 seconds of when they see you.
Correct.
So you have to make those 7 seconds count. So we have that photo shoot, or we have a closed community. We go through the workshops. And in the finale, I want your voice and your story to be shared. I have this African proverb, which is, until the lion learns to write, the story will always glorify the hunter. You know that one, right?
Yes, so much.
So I teach the women how to write. I teach the women how to public speak. And I create a Women of Color conference. It's the first one in Perth and in WA, where they share their story.
Brilliant.
And I think, that's my capstone project. And that's the gift I give them is at the end, you not only have the voice, but you have a recording of your story. And the way I teach the storytelling is, we don't want you to be the angry Black woman. We don't want you to be the submissive brown woman. We want you to step into your power and share your story in such a palatable way so that the other person is reflective and wants to support you, guide you, sponsor you, and advocate for you. So you stay in your power, you're authentic, and you move forward powerfully with your voice.
It just sounds incredible. I remember when I lived in Perth, they were having the first Women of Color conference in Melbourne, and I couldn't go because I was in Perth. And then now there's one happening in Perth, the first ever, and I'm on the other side of the country. So, but this is needed. It is needed. And just everything you've said has lit me up from the inside. And I know if you're listening and this is a story that you're just resonating with, this is a program that we need in our communities because we don't have them. We need them to help us see the things that we can't see and to be in communities where not only are we being validated, but they're giving us the fuel we need to push back on certain areas that perhaps we might not have the strength to do that on our own. And so I have a final question for you.
Yeah.
And it's a question that I ask all my guests who come on the podcast. And that question is, if fear wasn't a factor, how do you think you might show up more in the work that you do?
I think fear is always a factor. And I kind of look at courage as walking through fear. So courage is one of my values. And I'd actually say, even when I started my business 3.5 years ago, I felt a lot of fear. But I use that fear to fuel me to walk through. And I actually feel like I use fear to get me to actually take bigger risks, bigger actions. Fear is an energy and it drives you into motion. So why not use that? So I think that would be my answer is I use fear as an energy to move faster, to move bigger, to take bolder risks. And I have this line, God, I've forgotten it right now, but it's my favorite line of Coach Carter is you playing small does not serve the world. So every time I feel the fear, I listen to that. It's exactly a 2-minute podcast from Coach Carter. And I use that fear to kind of help me to take bigger steps.
I love that. I love that so much. And I have loved this conversation.
I've loved it as well. Thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed it. I feel like I've really connected.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've truly enjoyed this conversation.
It's been like just having a coffee with somebody who gets you, who understands you, no extra explanation needed. It's just nodding and nodding. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, yes, yes to everything that you've said. Now, where is the best place for listeners to connect with you and to buy your book?
Oh, definitely. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I think that's the place where I hang out a lot. So you can find Premila Jina on LinkedIn. My book is available on Amazon, The Unwritten Leader. So you can get it as a hard copy. I like to have hard copies because I like to write my notes as well. But I know a lot of people like to read it on Kindle as well. So it's available both on Kindle, but also as a hard copy. And I think that's my gift to you is if you can read that book and if it can help you on your journey to recognize where you've been silenced and how you can go from being silenced to be seen, heard, valued, and respected, then I feel I've done my job and I've made this world a better place.
Premila, thank you for making this a better world for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented.